Hey, y'all. Welcome to another episode of the Melanin Mayhem podcast, hosted by your favorite country girl, Renee Davis. If this is your first time getting your mayhem on, honey, what took you so long? You know what? It don't even matter. I'm glad you're here, fashionably late, but ready to party. Just to put you up on game, Melanin Mayhem spotlights prolific melanated criminals that did some audacious shit to a bunch of people, and we ain't even know about it. Either because their crimes were downplayed or they were just plain ignored in the media. But every Wednesday, I put one of their asses on Front Street because it's the country girl's mission in life to kill this false narrative that there are crimes that black people don't commit. Yes, the fuck we do. We been doing it, and I spill all the tea. New Nation, what's up, cousin? I hope your Easters were lit and that you enjoyed your Good Friday treat. The Love Kill series by Melanin Mayhem. The reviews and the DMs say that y'all are down with the shits. So keep sending me stories of the mayhem makers in your areas that we need to know about and bring to the front of the congregation, right? So this week, I felt like we needed a palate cleanser, right? We've had a steady diet of kill, drill, and destroy for the past few weeks. So I'm going to switch it up a little this week, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to get into some gangster shit. Now, you know I love a good street pharmacist, honey. And this week's story blew my mind because I really thought that I was up on my black gangsters. One of my favorite series just came back on. Godfather of Harlem, love Forrest Whitaker. So I went down a rabbit hole. I came up with a gangster that I didn't know nothing about. And so I went to my friend group. You know, I use them when I'm surveying to try to see if I'm going to do a story or not. And I asked them to name me 4 black gangster kingpins from the 60s and 70s, right? And they named all the usual suspects. But nobody said our mayhem maker's name. So I knew I was on to something, honey. So today I got the story of a kingpin that definitely needs a light shined on his amazing rise to power and his infamous escape from the law. You know, we know all about Bumpy Johnson and Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, and the Black Mafia, just to name a few. But while these gangsters were powerful and ruthless and successful in their drug endeavors, they controlled blocks. Or you know what I'm saying? They were the big fish in their city. The nigga I got for you today, he was the plug for more than 20 states as well as his city. He was a gangster's gangster. And I'm about to run it down for you, honey. Bringing to the front of the congregation, this week's Melanin Mayhem maker is Mr. Frank Matthews, a.k.a. Black Ceasar. All right, let's get into some gangster shit. Frank Larry Matthews was born February 13th, 1944 in Durham, North Carolina. Now his peoples, they called him Pee-wee. And you know if you black, you're going to have some type of nickname and it's going to be descriptive of either your looks or your habits. It's just how we do. Now, Frank's mother died when he was around 4 years old and his auntie raised him. Auntie was Marzella Steele. Marzella, honey, they don't name him like that no more. Now, Auntie Zella, she was married to a cop. So, you know, that household was a very law and order abiding type of situation, right? They're the law. So, that didn't stop Pee-wee, though. Frank didn't have no time for that bullshit. At around 7th, 8th grade, he was like, you know what? I got it from here. And then he enrolled into the School of Life. Y'all know about that School of Life? And boy, did Frankie jump in with both feet, honey. This little nigga ran with a gang of other little niggas out there in them country streets. Guess what they was out there doing? Honey, robbing motherfuckers for chickens. Motherfucking legs and thighs. Gotta remember now, this is Durham in the late 50s, early 60s, right? And for a southern city, it was prosperous, don't get me wrong now, and somewhat stable race relations. You know what I'm saying? From everything that I've read. And there were many, many melanated people who were rich, honey, deep pocketed, and the city was thriving. But it also had its fair share of poor people, right? And they did what they had to do to get by. And Frank's family was among those people, right? This is also the South, so it's country as hell. But country or not, if you're trying to get into something, you can find something to get into, honey. And a hustler gonna hustle, no matter what the hustle is. And Lil Pee Wee wasn't no different. He might come from the mud, but he also knew how to get it out the mud. Understand that in 1958 or today, if a motherfucker show up in the hood with some chicken for sale, he gonna sell out. Everybody glad to see the chicken man. So one night, October 2nd, 1960, Frank is like 16 years old, right? Him and his crew are out misappropriating breasts and thighs, and somebody catch him, and he start fussing and carrying on about how these young boys better get the fuck out of here, or somebody gonna fuck around and find out. Well, unfortunately for the man whose chickens it was, Lil Frank wanted all that smoke. He hit that man in the head with a brick. Honey, bust his shit to the white meat. Mm-hmm. Frank caught a charge on that shit too, and he went to jail. Well, not jail. He went to little boys' prison, right? And while he was there, he took up some barbering classes because that was a part of the slap on the wrist that he got. He also got that because he was a minor. Again, 16 years old. So when he got out, he gets a job at a little barber shop or whatever. But then some shit came up missing. So, Pee Wee's services were no longer needed. And I'm thinking, step uncle was probably not with none of that bullshit, being an officer of the goddamn law. He can't have no criminals living in his house. So Lil Frank was like, you know what? Bet. I got a partner that live up north. It's time for me to go and do my thing. So he throw the deuces to Durham, North Carolina, and he heads north to Philly, baby. Now, Frank is 17 and full of himself, honey. When he gets to Philadelphia, he jumps down with a little job as a numbers runner. And that's the underground lottery from back in the day. In the South, we called it playing the bug. I remember my grandmama and them used to play the bug. I don't know why they called it the bug, but that's what they called it. Anyway, not the point. This is a good job for Frank, right? He's new to the big city and country as a bowl of grits. He need to get his swag up to northern standards, you know what I'm saying? And running numbers, that's a people person's perfect job. And Lil Frank, he had a way with the peoples with his country ass. Kind of like the country girl. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, everybody played the numbers back then, for real. Honey, because a dollar might get you paid. So Frank is coming in contact with all kind of people, and these people do all kind of shit, right? And Frank is starting to be one of them niggas that know everybody, and everybody know Frank. He's laying a good foundation of contacts to be able to use to his advantage and flip the game in the future. You know what I'm saying? Now, the numbers wasn't legal, and the cops knew who Frank's ass was too and what he was doing. And when you out there running in these streets, eventually you gonna have some interactions with the popo, and Frank was no exception. He got hemmed up a few times, but nothing that was arrestable apparently, until he got popped on January 12th, 1963. He didn't really get popped though, because there's no arrest record. I mean, his name is in the book. They didn't lock him up or whatever. It was more, I guess, of a warning type of situation. But they must have made it clear that it would probably be better for him if he was not physically present in Philadelphia anymore. And I'm telling you, y'all gonna see Frank ain't no dumb nigga. He know how to read the room. So the next thing you know, Frank's ass decides it's time to take a bite out the Big Apple, and that's exactly what he did. Next stop, New York, baby. He settles into Brooklyn, BK, baby, in the Bed-Stuy area. And guess what? Now he got a wife and some children. Between running these streets and making connections, Frank had also made a love connection, honey, with a woman named Barbara Hinton. Now, Barbara got it going on. She's smart as fuck, she look good, and she real good with numbers. You know, that accounting and shit, right? She done been to school and got some degrees. She got a good job in corporate, baby. But guess what? It's the late 60s, and she's a woman, a black woman at that. So, her skills were not being fully appreciated. And that glass ceiling, it was more like a concrete box, if you know what I mean. But Frank saw her for her brains as well as her beauty and made her his wifey. And though Frank kept a side piece, Barbara played her part, baby. Wife, understand. So they moved to Brooklyn and Frank get right on getting to the bag, right? Setting up and he doing what he knows what works. He put his skills, what he learned at baby boot camp and he opens a barbershop. It was perfect. He got a spot where people are in and out all day, so he can run all kind of plays up in that bit. He get him a little entry level number running gig, you know what I'm saying? The money is good. He in his new city, and once again, he's making new connections. I see you, Frank. And guess what? Frank is a grown man now, honey. Ain't no more Pee-wee. Country boy has got his city swag now, honey. And he good with his hands too, man. That nigga got a serious two-piece that don't even need a biscuit. I'm talking Frank was so nice with it. After a while, they didn't want him running them numbers no more. He got a promotion. Now he's collecting and enforcing. Frank on that bitch better have my money time. And just like everything else that he put his mind to, he good at what he do. And again, New York ain't no different from Philly. If you into street activities, you're going to have some interactions with the law. This time, Frank was like Teflon for real. Nothing stuck. He got arrested December 23rd, 1966. They got him for running policies in Brooklyn, running numbers, but the charges were dismissed. 2 years later, March 25th, 1968, he get caught up in Jacksonville, Florida. Now this is crazy, y'all. They said that he didn't register as a felon within 48 hours of entering the county. What the fuck? I wasn't even there, and I know that Frank was just passing through. And even more so, why the fuck was this even a thing? Because Frank ain't no felon. The only thing this nigga has ever gotten convicted for is for jacking chickens. And I don't think that was a felony. But apparently Jacksonville felt differently. And all for what? I don't know, because they too ended up dismissing the charges. Okay, so again, nothing sticks. The following year, February 1st, 1969, he was arrested in Brooklyn for promoting gambling. So let's all say it together. The charges were dismissed. Most gangsters have an arrest record of some type. You know what I'm saying? At this point in time, and for the rest of his life, the only thing that Frank was convicted of was stealing chickens. Okay? Not what you would normally hear on the resume of a gangster, but stay with me now. I'm taking you somewhere. So Frank, he knew how to stick and move. He's young, he's fearless, and he is ready to put in that work, right? He got this good hustle going with these numbers and this gambling, little small time dealing and shit, you know what I'm saying? He's living a good life. He's making comfortable money. Y'all know what comfortable money is, right? That's that all my bills are paid, no problem. And I can go stunt at the club, you know what I'm saying? Got a nice whip, nice drip, nice crib. He all right. But Frank wanted more than just all right. He wanted his name on a blimp. He want to be on the scene. He see how these gangster niggas be really out here rolling in these streets. And like any enterprising young street nigga, Frank got aspirations of greatness. He been getting his weight up. He's been making his contacts. And now he ready to make some real money. Now, if you've watched any gangster movie, I'm talking black or white, Rage in Harlem to Godfather, you know that the Italians, they were the plug, and they ain't like fucking with black people, right? But at the same time, for Frank, he know he got his ear to the streets and he trying to get into the dope game kind of heavy. He gotta try to get an Italian connect. So he did. He tried to get on with all the capos. You know, the Italian mob. Yeah, them. Frank tried to get on with all of them. I'm talking about job interviews all over the place. And they all said, forget about it. Ooh, my Italian was probably terrible. That's okay. I'm the country girl. The Italians, they weren't interested in his young ass. And I'm thinking race relations being what they were at the time in New York, it looked like the mafiosos felt like they had all the blacks they needed. And you know what? At the same time, Frank didn't even want to fuck with them Italians, no way. He had a strong dislike for the salt game and wasn't interested in getting into business with the motherfuckers. That wasn't what he wanted to do. But you know, after getting your balloon popped by the mafia, some people would give up. Not our boy Frank. Honey. He is the if there is a will, there is a way type of motherfucker. Cause remember, everybody know Frank, and Frank know everybody. And it was time to use what he got to get what he want. And what he got is friends in all kind of places. And now it was time to think outside of the box for a way into the dope game. It's 1970 now, and Frank goes to Harlem and chops it up with a big time numbers dude named Raymond Marquez. They called him Spanish Raymond. Now, Spanish Raymond, he got to connect with a Cuban nigga named Rolando Nunez. Rolando is a big time dope dealer in Manhattan, right? So Frank hit up Spanish Raymond and he like, hey man, if you can get me a meet up with your Cuban partner, I can go straight to the source and fuck them Italians and they dope. I can get my shit myself without their asses. And so Spanish Raymond, he go and he make a few calls like a good friend does. And the next thing you know, Spanish Raymond hooks Frank up with Rolando, the Cuban plug. Y'all feel me now? Stay with me. So Frank, he go and get this sit down with Cuban Roe. They chop it up. And Cuban Roe is down with Frank's fuck them Italians business plan, right? So he agreed to supply Frank with all the birds he need to flood the streets. And Cuban Roe even gives Frank a crash course in how to sell heroin. Shit, Frank straight now. He got a plug and a steady supply of quality dope. Shit, everything look like it's about to go down like a plane crash. But you know what? When everything looking like it's all gravy, life has a way of lifing. And it started lifing for Cuban Roe. See, what had happened was Cuban Roe, shortly thereafter, he got caught up in some indictment type of shenanigan, and he wasn't planning on staying around to see how it all played out. But on his way to fugitivedom in Venezuela, he was like, hey, Frank, I know I got to go. Before I go, I got something for you. It's gonna take me a little minute to get myself situated in my new digs, but once I get straight, we're gonna pick back up where we left off. And Frank was like, bet. So Cuban Roe shoots Frank his first bird for 20 bands. Okay. Frank got that first kilo and he is off to the races. That shit was pure as a newborn baby. So Frank could step on it and triple his money. And his shit was still potent. Okay, dope. I see you. After that first kilo, Frank and Cuban Roe, they was really feeling each other. So then Cuban Roe put Frank on directly with the Corsicans. And as we all know, if you've ever heard that name from any Godfather movie, these were the motherfuckers that had all the dope, right? And they supplied it to the Italians who would then supply it to the blacks. This was always the way dope had been run since dope had been running, right? But now, thanks to the Cuban link, Frank don't need the mafia to give him a seat at the table, honey. He built his own damn table. And this nigga finna eat. Frank was kind of a genius about the way he handled his business. It was a well-oiled machine. He had people in place for all types of contingencies. You know, when something happens over here, he can go pull a lever over here. I mean, he had a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. You know what I'm saying? He had the varsity team and the junior varsity team. Frank knowing people in all kinds of places was how he was able to pull this whole thing off. Y'all, he had American Airlines flight attendants on his payroll. They would bring in the kilos, and that was a sweet ass lick because, you know, this was pre TSA. Actually, it was even pre the word flight attendant. At this point, they were still called stewardesses. Anyway, them hoes could pack anything in their bags, and they didn't get checked. No TSA. Frank had a gang of them on his payroll, as well as people in cargo and customs that would get his shit through. So that was his network set up for how he was importing the dope, right? Now was his base of operations stateside, right? Now I'm gonna tell you, before there was the Carter, shout out to New Jack City Nino Brown, there was the Ponderosa and the OK Corral. That's what they call Frank's drug houses where the processing and the packing happened. I'm talking whole apartment buildings, baby, heavily fortified with doors that took a lot of manpower to get through. Lookouts and niggas with guns on the roof and shit. Naked motherfuckers in the processing room bagging up dope. What it was that Pookie said? Titties everywhere. This is where they got the shipments of the dope that was imported, of the pure heroin and the coke, and they bust that shit down. Remember, this is their pure. And after it was processed to Frank's special blend, it was packaged for wholesale and retail, ready to be distributed on the streets of New York and New Jersey. So, okay, Frank got his little local money. He's sitting pretty. The plug is keeping Frank flush with pure coke and heroin. Frank brought it in. He cut that shit. He sold that shit. But surprisingly, Frank ain't on the radar of any law enforcement. Like, I mean, he got local cops on the payroll to make sure he don't get caught slipping. That's just part of the game. But there was no one investigating or looking into Frank Matthews' drug organization. Now, just because the cops weren't hip to the game, the hood was very in tune to what was going on. And Frank had his regular degular bullshit with other drug dealers. I mean, there were shootouts and robberies. I mean, that shit come with the territory, but they handled that shit in-house. Nobody was out there snitching, clearly, because again, the cops don't know about Frank Matthews. And baby, the money is rolling in. Honey, Barbara, the wife, she got the books on point and she mixing that dirty money with the clean money through real estate and shit. They taking bags and bags of money to the casinos in Vegas and letting them clean that money. Baby, like I said, this enterprise is up and running and it's running smoothly. I mean, as smoothly as one can expect a street-based corporation to do. And you know what typically happens to those independent pharmaceutical salespeople? Your boy Frank thought that he could step it up. And he did, boy. Baby, he did big boy steps. Let me tell you all about it. You see, since he had his own connection and he didn't have to depend on these Italians to make his paper, he has decided that it's time to branch out. And this is a major development, y'all, because in those days, somebody white always had to be the go-between, right? But times was changing. Civil rights was the goal, and the niggas didn't want to have to fuck with the white man to eat no more. You know what I'm saying? Frank forming his own ties to the plug was a major fucking play. That in and of itself deserves a congratulations, nigga. You did that shit. But Frank, he ain't need nobody patting him on the back. This dude was a strategic thinker and a great relationship builder. He wasn't content with being just a local dealer no more. Frank wants to franchise this thing out. So he did. Remember, Frank know a lot of people from running these streets, so he do what any enterprising businessman does. He became a traveling salesman. He started hitting up the cities that had existing markets, and he would go to where the drug dealers went when they wanted to floss in their city. I'm talking the juke joints and the speakeasies, the boxing matches, a concert, you know what I'm saying? Gambling spots. And you know, while stopping through, gang recognized gang. You know what I'm saying? You show up where the niggas be doing nigga shit and floss, money gonna recognize money, and gang gonna recognize gang. You know what money look like when they walk in the door? And Frank was money. He would come on the scene, gamble a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Drop big bread, get some girls, and then chop it up with the local bitch. Eventually, the conversation get into some money making talk, and the rest is history. And that's what the white folks didn't understand, as well as what they fear the most. Black folks working together and getting to the motherfucking bag without their asses and regardless of their ass. Frank had a legion of people that were down to getting their work from a black man and not having to deal with the motherfucking Saltine Nation. Okay, Frank, I see you, boy. Hey, you know how it go when you run into the hookup. Them niggas was picking up what Frank was putting down. And what Frank was putting down was a foundation, a network of drug dealers that would span more than a dozen cities across the U.S. I'm talking Newark, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Boston, New Haven, Miami, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, St. Louis, Chicago, New York, Cincinnati, Vegas, and L.A. Ooh, child. Now that's a network, honey. That's coast to coast. Come on now. But you know, the thing about Frank that's different from what the other gangsters we know more about is that Frank actually shied away from violence. I mean, don't get me wrong. He do what have to be done and did it. But he was a thinking man. He preferred to use logic over brutality. He in street shit, so violence kind of comes with the territory. But Frank was the type of man that when the situation started getting too wild, he would just close up shop and move on. Like that happened in Philly, from what I understand. Philly don't play the motherfucking radio then or now. That's just what I heard. But anyway, what I'm trying to get you to understand is that for Frank, he felt that there were plenty of pastures to get his green in elsewhere before losing a whole lot of soldiers and money and bringing in that heat that he didn't need on his organization. And y'all, the law still don't know that this nigga is out here doing it like he doing it. I swear, this is the last time in history that the no snitch gang was still alive. But baby, shit is about to come to an end in the most random ass way. Now, I've told you 1,000 times. Frank Matthews was doing all of this, and the cops didn't have a clue. Guess how they found out? Not because the nigga snitched. Oh no. The nigga got found out all because of a pissed off neighbor. If you've ever been to New York, parking is a whole event in New York. You know what I'm saying? And in the Brooklyn neighborhood where Frank lived, one of his neighbors got mad because he couldn't find nowhere to park. Why couldn't he find anywhere to park? Every week, all of the spots were taken up by all of these cars that was just going to this one house. So what the neighbor do? He went and hollered at a cop that also lived in Frank's building, cop named Joe Kowalski, and he was like, "Hey Joe, check this out. Can you see what the fuck is going on here? Why are all these out-of-state tags here and taking up all of the parking spots? This doesn't make any sense." And so the cop, he's thinking that it's nothing, this just a situation, neighbors being neighbors or whatever. But he said, yeah, I'll look into it. So Officer Kowalski, he knows of the black man the neighbor is talking about. He lives in the building, you know what I'm saying? So of course he has on occasion seen the flashy Negro with the fancy cars. Officer Joe figures that he was a pimp and basically kept it pushing. But now that this pimpin' ass Negro was causing some problems with a fellow sour creamian, he gotta look into it and see what the fuck this nigga got going on, right? So Officer Joe, he started his own little investigation, and sure enough, there are a lot of cars parked around the building with out-of-state tags. Nice cars, too. Shit. He started running the license plates of all these fancy cars and come to find out these motherfuckers is known drug dealers. I'm talking big time of drug dealers. Who the fuck they all coming to see in Brooklyn? They coming to see the Negro that Joe thinks is a pimp, and it's the one and only under the radar Mr. Frank Matthews, honey. Now, Officer Joe know that if there's big timers in the building, they ain't coming for no hoe shit. He ain't no pimp. So what the fuck do we have here? So he watching and he documenting. He did that shit for about 6 to 9 months before he took all the evidence that he had collected to his superiors. He presents his case that there is a huge drug lord right under their noses doing big time deals. They run that shit up the flagpole, and the next thing you know, the Frank Matthews case is assigned to the New York Joint Drug Task Force, headed up by a man named Gerard Miller, who was a motherfucker that enjoyed locking up drug dealers, and Frank was gonna be his newest target. Now, that all sounds like a major law enforcement group is about to beat on Frank's ass, and it kind of was, and it kind of wasn't at the same damn time. You see, the task force was made up of 12 people from various agencies, right? And that's about it. There was no money allocated to the task force, so everything, and I do mean everything, had to come out of these officers' pockets. The fuck? You want me to investigate and foot the bill to do my work? The devil is a lie. But them goddamn flower rangers, they see things differently. They took that shit on as an honor to bring down this criminal at their own expense, literally. More power to y'all, though. You know what I'm saying? We just see things a little differently. But that just made it tough because they are civil servants. You know what I'm saying? They ain't got no money and they only have a short ass amount of time to get this investigation up and rolling and showing some real progress, right? And I'm talking like 3 months. It's looking bad for the home team. But then a judge grants they ass a wiretap. And ooh, Lord, honey, when I say they got everything they needed to build a case on Frank Matthews. Good Lord, I mean everything. A lot don't care who tell it, honey. Motherfucker will stress the truth. They will lie on their wallets or their income. You know what I'm saying? Frank, they found out though, was the real motherfucking deal. They listening in and they are hearing him make multi-million-dollar deals, y'all. Frank don't know his shit tap. And for him, he still think he flying under the radar, so he talking reckless as a motherfucker. They got this nigga on tape telling somebody to pull up on him because he had $4 million on him. And did. $4 million? Sweet heroin Jesus. Frank, that was your pocket change. Ooh, now that's how you stun on a motherfucker. $4 million? Just sitting right here, baby. Come on, look at it. That's not conjecture. That's not somebody saying what they heard from somebody else. They hearing this shit straight from the horse's mouth. They hear him placing orders for hundreds of kilos of dope. And they follow his people and they take pictures of the drops and the pickups and the ins and the outs of the drug houses. Baby, them alphabet boys could not believe all this was going on. And they didn't have a motherfucking clue. And why didn't the law know about Frank Matthews? Well, I'm gonna tell you why they didn't know. They were following the flawed logic that a nigga could possibly purchase, import, and distribute large quantities of dope on his or her own. That was impossible, improbable, and crazy talk, honey. If a nigga was associated with the dope game, he had to be connected and greenlit by the mafia. So those were the only niggas that they kept an eye on. And you know, they love to discount melanated people anytime they can and then be shocked and amazed when they see that we actually do the shit that they don't think we can do, whatever that shit is. So with that prevailing thought, there was no black person that would be able to form their connections for dope. So they only focused on gangsters like Bumpy Johnson, Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, you know what I'm saying? So using their biases against them, Frank was able to stick and move even after he was found out. This motherfucker outsmarted them cops at every turn. He stopped being reckless on the phone. It was a little too late at that point, but he drove cars that could outrun a tail, baby. And that shit worked out perfect for his criminalistic endeavors, y'all. This motherfucker had a crew of smart, hungry motherfuckers, from accountants to lawyers to enforcers and traffickers, and everybody played their motherfucking position. By the time 1971 rolled around, y'all, according to the IRS and the DEA, that goddamn Frank was bringing in like $10 million dividends in deep pocketry a year, honey. $10 million in cold, hard, untaxed cash was a grip of money in the 70s. Like, baby, understand, that would be the equivalent of $78,962,716.05, honey. Good googly moogly. Jesus, shit, that nigga was getting that major bag. The strategicness of it all. He wasn't just out for himself, though. Frank wanted all the melanated majors to be profitable and successful and to keep that shit going. So what he do? This motherfucker held a summit of the kingpins. The first one was in October of 1971, right here in my neck of the woods, honey, in Atlanta. I tell you, everything somehow, some way comes through Atlanta. Frank hosted the top black and Hispanic kingpins and up and coming gangsters. If the nigga hadn't got caught up with the law, it probably would have been an annual event because the second summit of the kingpins was held a year later in 72 in Vegas. It was held when Ali was fighting Jared Corey. That was a good look and a good location because you know we love a good fight so we can step out in our Sunday best and stun on a motherfucker. Ooh, child, a mix of it all. I love it. The 70s was good time. For black people, when we stepped out, baby, we stepped out. But you see, he wasn't just bringing these crime mobs together to stunt. He was trying to get things organized. You know, come up and share the best practices for their profession, right? Do a temperature check on what trickery the law was using. You know, they discuss shit like distribution and product quality and how not to have to do business with these mob motherfuckers. And when you did have to do business with them, what you needed to be on the lookout for. Independence was all he wanted for the brothers, just like he had. For the most part. I mean, he still had to do a few dealings with the mafia people, but the bulk of his shit came direct from the plug. Frank was big by this time, you know what I'm saying? Early 70s. And as he was putting on these summits and shit, you know, when you the big man, you got a big target on that ass too. And the shit was getting a little too hot to keep his family in the city, in the thick of it all, and in easy reach of his ops. So in early 1972, Frank decided to move his wife and kids out of the city, honey. They needed a crib that was more befitting a man of his stature. This nigga was moving major weight, and he had cash to blow, honey. And at 28, Frank had fuck you money. So what you do when you got more money than the mob? you move your ass to the neighborhood where the capos live. Yes, honey. Frank left his apartment in the city for a $260,000 mansion in Tote Hill on Staten Island. This neighborhood, Tote Hill, this is where the mafia bosses like Paul Castellano and the Lucchese family capos live. Yeah. Now please understand, Frank and his family, they was the only niggas for miles. I mean, they legit were the flies in the milk. Man, them crackers was better than a motherfucker. They tried to keep his ass out of there too, honey. They told him that niggas probably wouldn't be welcomed when he went to go look at the house. And Frank was like, whatever. And when he went to the bank, they said, you know what, sir, we can't give you no loan. And Frank was like, who said anything about a mortgage? And put the cash on the table. Paid in full, motherfucker. No mortgages around here, honey. This my shit. Ooh, you know the unseasons like to have died when they saw the grill being unloaded and when the basketball court was being installed. They was like, who in the hell left the gate open? Ooh, child, they was mad. They were so mad. They say that the mob bosses even stepped to Frank, knocked on his motherfucking door, and was like, hey man, you need to get the fuck up out of here. Your kind ain't welcome around here. Frank looked at them motherfuckers and was like, bring it. We'll tear all this shit down. You don't want this smoke with me? Okay, Frank. Frank and the family moved in and they lived. I mean, they lived across the street from mob bosses. Ooh, woo. And when I tell you no expense was spared to renovate that goddamn mansion to the gods, it wasn't the only house they had though. Oh no. They had apartments in the city and houses in other states and shit. Frank had hella real estate and his criminal money was diversified, honey, thanks to Miss Barbara. But you know, the mob, they stooped to some dirty shit. Now, they was so mad because Frank was living in their neighborhood. Why they started telling on his ass? Yes, the mob was snitching, y'all. Somebody was giving anonymous tips to law enforcement every single tag that went to Frank's house. Somebody would call the police and tell them who was at Frank's house. Now, mind you, this is a big gated ass community. Ain't no random ass cars coming up in here and you can't see what's going on at Frank's house. So the only people who could actually tell somebody what was going on at Frank's house was going to be somebody that lived next door, in front of, very close. Okay, Ma. Ooh, snitchy, snitch. That's some old dirty tricks. And guess what? It still didn't work because Frank still had that house. But now he on everybody's radar. Ooh, I'm talking DEA, FBI, all the alphabet boys. So the raids have started. Like in September 72, the cops raided the Ponderosa. Or should I say tried to raid it? I mean, is it really a raid if it took them almost 2 hours to get through the doors? 2 hours! I told you the motherfuckers was fortified. By the time the police actually got in, everybody had done got out. But check this out. The shit they left behind, it blew the cops away. They say there was like a half a kilo of residue on the floor. Just on the floor, niggas walking through it, right? They found 2 million little baggies. 2 million little baggies. You know, these are the baggies that they put the dope in. If each baggie is $10, $10 times 2 million baggies is $20 million. The motherfuckers were finna bag up. Wow. In addition to that, they got guns and about $148,000. That's what they left behind in some of that. Fuck everything else, let's go. Man, But Frank, he wasn't there, and they couldn't tie Frank to the Ponderosa or its activities. As usual, Frank is Teflon. Ain't nothing sticking, baby. This nigga is for true Black Caesar now. And because of that, the Flower Rangers, ooh, they was pissed to the peak of festivity at this point. They want Frank ass real bad, but they just can't. So they do the next best thing. They start snatching up his crew. One by one, lieutenants start catching indictments. Associates in the network, traffickers, they was all falling one by one. This cops was squeezing them, all of them hard, trying to get info or trying to get them to flip on Frank. But the problem was, it wasn't working. Either the people that they got were too far removed to be in Frank's orbit, and if they were in the circle, them motherfuckers wasn't talking. So what do you do when you can't build your criminal case on a motherfucker? You bring in the eye, the aura, in the motherfucking S. Cause Luther already told us you don't fuck with them. Oh yes, this is true. And since they couldn't lock it down with a criminal indictment, it was time to get the IRS to hit him with tax evasion. Cause nigga, you living large and in charge. And Uncle Sam did not get his cut, honey. Mm-mm. It's December 1972, just before the holidays, when the indictment came down. But you know, Frank, he ain't knowing that he on deck. He moving and grooving like it's a normal holiday, right? He got plans. Him and his little side piece, boo, they finna fly west for the new year. Now, you know I told y'all Frank keep a bit in the cut, and Barbara ain't tripping, so don't start. You see, Frank got this little cutie. Her name is Cheryl Denise Brown. Ooh, she's a young tenderoni, and she love herself some Frank, honey. So he got to do a little business. So they're going to fly to Vegas, handle the business, and then they're going to go on to L.A. So they get to Vegas, they bring in the new year or whatnot, and the night before they flying out to LA, Frank dropped like $170,000 in the casino, which ain't shit because he brings duffel bags of cash to Vegas all the time to have the casinos watch that shit for him. So, you know, he just giving back. So the next morning, January 5th, 1973, him and Cheryl, probably still a little hungover from their night before at the casino, they head to the airport. But baby, instead of catching a flight, Frank caught a case. Yes, they even put bracelets on Cheryl. Honey, they was talking about she had burglary tools in her bag. Okay, Cheryl. I guess she believed that if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Okay, girl. Now, what's funny? Your boy Frank, oh, Black Ceasar, they say that motherfucker had $25,000 in his pocket. Y'all know in 2025, that would be the equivalent of $185,650 dividends and deep pocketries. This nigga was the original Floyd Mayweather. Okay. That wasn't all they had on Frank either. They had your boy Frank on record letting them birds fly, honey. The nigga was charged with possession with intent to distribute 18 kilos of cocaine, which was worth about, if depending on who you believe, between 4.5 to 8.5 million, depending on how it was cut. Ooh, honey, that ain't no small potatoes we talking about here, honey. They indicted Frank with conspiracy to distribute heroin and conspiracy to distribute cocaine, and then they hit his ass with a history-making bond. Y'all, in 1973, they told Frank they wanted a $5 million bond. $5 million was unheard of in 1973. They might as well have said they wanted 20 gazillion bazillion dollars. And even though Frank had that and could do that, you don't take being given the largest bail in history lightly. You gotta contest that shit. And that's exactly what Frank's lawyers did. They huffed and they puffed and they called out racism and classism and criminalism and every other ism that they can think of. And their efforts paid off too, honey, because a day later, the bail was reduced by half to $2.5 million, which was and is still a grip of money, right? And while the feds were on that ass for possession with intent, the IRS was not going to be left out the game, honey. So they did to him what they do to the gangsters that don't file their tax returns on their dope money. They hit that ass with a tax evasion charge. For Frank Matthews, that shit hit to the tune of $7,009,165. I guess Luther was right. Damn. So they extradite Frank back to New York, and the case was being led by U.S. Attorney Robert A. Morris out of the Brooklyn district. And in New York, the bond amount is actually $325,000. You know, you can explain where that cash came from. You know, $325,000 versus $2.5 million. Frank's people in Durham, they came together and they posted his bail and they used his auntie house as collateral. Clearly somebody was slipping. The reason they had given him such a high bail, that was the government's attempt to keep that ass locked up, right? This nigga got more money than the mob. He could have literally dropped $5 million in pennies in a sock, but the IRS would have had that ass at that point, right? $325,000? Shit, Frank got that in the seat cushions of his Rolls Royce. So he's out on bond. It's a week later. The conditions of his bond are that Frank has to report to the U.S. Attorney Raymond Deary. He got to report to Raymond Deary's office every Monday and Wednesday by phone, and every Friday he got to come in person. I mean, that's a lot. And Frank did that shit though for like 6 months. This indictment was huge. I mean, there were 14 gangsters listed as Frank's associates from all over the country, also in the indictment. But then one day he showed up, for his in person check in, and he is approached by somebody from the DA's office. Now, this person supposedly tells Frank that a new indictment is coming down, and this time ain't gonna be no bond. Frank is like, word. And the DA was like, yeah, we keeping it on the down low, but it's coming sooner rather than later. Now, Frank is not the nigga to go off of some he said, she said type of shit. So he goes back in the courtroom and they are about to call it a day. The judge makes an announcement that everybody needs to be in court in person on Monday. That's strange, but it's also very telling at the same damn time, right? Now, at the same time, Frank happens to get a second to be in the presence of the judge. I don't know how it happened, but it did. But he asked the judge, hey man, are the rumors that I'm hearing true? Y'all got another indictment that's about to come down on me and y'all gonna revoke my bond and keep me behind bars? And the judge, in his best, yeah, we got your ass now, nigga. He says, Mr. Matthews, that sounds about right. And he kept it pushing. New Nation. Frank ain't been locked up since he was stealing breast and thighs as a child in Durham. This fly-ass, rich-ass nigga is not about to let them diddy his ass. Frank leaves the courtroom, grabs up Cheryl, and get in his car. They say Frank went all around New York that night. He was gambling, but it looked like he was trying to lose. From spot to spot, Frank is shooting craps and betting big, like $5,000 a roll, and purposefully missing his point. Frank is a gambler's gambler. This nigga don't lose, but this night, he lost everywhere he went. He tipped out big. Brought him an ashtray, $500. You gave the man a towel in the bathroom, $500. I mean, he is passing out money like it's going out of style. And he did that all night long, everywhere he went. They say all in all, that nigga dropped about $160,000 that night. But you see, what they didn't know, it was more like Frank was going on a farewell tour and he was spreading the money around one last time to make sure everybody had a little piece of change. You know what I mean? When the last dice was rolled, him and Cheryl jumped in the car and they drove off into the sunset and they went to Durham. And they went down there for two reasons. Partially was to continue the farewell tour, and it was also because Frank had a safe deposit box that was down there in the bank. Frank hit up all his people, dropped cash everywhere he went, and he said his goodbyes. He hit the bank, got his whatever out his safety deposit box, and then him and Cheryl ghosted on everybody ass, walking away with $20 million dividends and deep pocketry. Ooh, Lord. Now, the following day, it was court time. Monday, June 25th, 1973. Everybody at the courthouse. Baby, the Flower Rangers is walking around with a pep in their step. They happy and shit because they about to stick it to a uppity nigga. But then, wasn't no Frank. Did he call? Can someone check to see if we have any missed phone calls from a Mr. Frank Matthews? Maybe he's running late. Maybe it's traffic or something. No. Ain't no messages from a Frank Matthews or anybody calling on his behalf. Mr. Frank Matthews, the lawyer, do you know where your client is? No, Your Honor, I don't know where my client is. Ooh, baby, how them smiles turned upside down. This nigga is in the wind. Motherfucker. Baby, they quickly revoked his bail and put an APB out on him and Cheryl. Now understand, the law was shook. How the fuck did we let this nigga slip through our fingers? And of course, then the finger pointing started. They all started getting cocky. This was the goddamn law. The FBI, the DEA, the NYPD. Shit, even the YMCA was looking for Frank. All the alphabet boys felt like they had what it took and they would have Frank's ass in custody in no time. Yeah, no. Even though Frank was the most wanted nigga of all time at the time, and them boys was out beating them streets hard looking for Frank, all that shit was futile because nobody was saying shit. They interrogated his wife. Barbara, she said she ain't know nothing. And clearly she wasn't part of the plan because he left her ass behind with the kids. She told them, shit, this nigga ran off with the side bitch. I am distraught. And speaking of the side bitch, they also went by Cheryl's people's houses, right? Her parents. They questioned them for hours. They didn't know nothing neither. Cheryl was their baby. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. They worried sick. But you know what? Authorities don't believe none of their asses. All of them lying, they believe. So they put wiretaps on their phones. But they never ever heard any evidence of any calls relating to Frank or Cheryl, present, past, or future. It was like they just dropped off the face of the earth for everybody. They staked out the houses. Like it wasn't enough to just have the wiretaps. They were sitting outside just looking to see if Frank was going to pop up anywhere. Frank never did. So they put him on the most wanted list and put a $20,000 reward on his head. Again, this is a grip of money in 1973, but no one ever got to claim that shit. Now, there were people calling in tips. Please understand, for 20 bands, you're going to get some calls. Frank was spotted all over the place, from the streets to the Caribbean to Africa to South America, and they chased all them leads down, and they came up empty-handed every damn time. To date, Frank Larry Matthews has been a fugitive of the goddamn law for what will be 52 years this June 26th. He is 81 years old. And you know what? I'm talking about the marshals and the FBI, they still think that nigga is alive and kicking. They say no bodies have ever turned up, and dead bodies are fingerprinted and put into a database apparently, so it would have flagged if Frank turned up dead even under a different name. There was never any talk on them wiretap lines, because they had wiretaps on the mob and the connected gangsters in Frank's orbit, you know what I'm saying? Nobody ever said anything about having whacked Frank. And a motherfucker love to brag on the shit they do. So if somebody would have taken out Frank, that would have been good piping hot tea, and it would have definitely been spilling. And they also have these age progressed photos of what Frank might look like today. But seriously, we don't know what Frank Matthews would look like today, because I am sure he altered his appearance. Shit, fuck plastic surgery. This nigga had enough money to buy a whole new body. For all we know, he could be a whole ass white man now. They really thought Cheryl was going to be what got him caught, because she was really, really tight with her parents. But from their perspective, not a word, not any type of communication happened between Cheryl and her parents. They thought for sure she would miss her mom and them. Eventually, she would pop up at something like a funeral or something. But you see, I think, like I always say, they discounted us. Like Frank wasn't smart enough or rich enough to have contingencies in place. The man who had contingencies in place for his business to keep him under the radar. You don't think he got something in place so that he can keep in contact with his people and Cheryl can keep in contact with hers? A Dropbox or something with letters of mail to. I'm thinking mom and them go to church and somebody slide them a letter, you know what I'm saying? Or they happen to get a phone call during the service, you know what I'm saying? When ain't nobody looking. Frank always has been a where there is a will, there's a way kind of nigga. I don't believe for 1 minute that he stopped. And of course Cheryl would want to keep in touch with her people. And she did. I believe Frank made that happen. I mean, he thought of everything, and he did his best to make sure nobody got fucked up in his escapery shenanigans. Because you remember, he was out on bail. His auntie's house had been put up for collateral. When he jumped bail, they would have taken her house. They would have taken it if it hadn't been for a suitcase full of cash being delivered to the bonding company to cover everything his aunt would have been on the hook for. Ooh, them alphabet boys was super pissed about that shit. Well, I guess it's better to be pissed off than pissed on. New Nation. That was the story of Frank Larry Matthews, a man that rose from humble beginnings as a yardbird yanker to a multi-millionaire in 13 short years. I think it's crazy that there are no movies about him. I mean, there is one documentary that came out in 2012, and I'll put the link in the show notes for y'all to check it out because it's good, but it's the only one. There's no TV series, ain't nothing on Tubi, you know what I'm saying? This nigga was a real deal gangster. And he got away with his money and his girl, and he never got caught. And more importantly, he never snitched. I find it ironic that Bumpy Johnson and Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, they all got some shine in this media entertainment shit, right? Their stories have been put on screens and whatnot, but them niggas weren't as big as Frank Matthews, and all they asses was some snitches. You know how I feel about that. If you doing a crime, you do your time and you keep everybody's name out your mouth when you talking to these authorities. Don't do their job for them. And Frank didn't. Rather than snitch, he just dipped on their ass. And he got away clean. No shootouts. Nobody got hurt. Like this nigga should be the patron saint of drug dealers. There should be a Frank Matthews MVP award at the Players Ball. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not glorifying the dope game. Well, maybe just a little. But I am a realist. Back in the days, before we had our civil rights, making a bag was difficult. And many a white wealthy family of today had their roots solidified in criminal activities like bootlegging and shit. They just had an opportunity to turn their dirty money into thriving corporations. We didn't have that opportunity, but there were gangsters that made sure that the hood ate. They did what needed to be done. And yes, it had an impact on the community. But quiet as it's kept, as long as there are humans on the planet, some of them humans gonna get geeked off something. For them, it was heroin. That's what made the bank. And then there was cocaine. Time moves on, right? People and the culture change, but the desire to get lifted, that shit don't change. I mean, when was the last time you saw somebody talking about they take heroin? Hell, for that matter, when was the last time you saw a crackhead? Do they even still make crack? Like heroin and crack are like the E&J and Paul Masson of the drug world. It's like a Jerry curl. Sure, there are one or two antique drug users that use that shit, but today it's meth and fentanyl and all that designer shit, right? A motherfucker and cocaine. It's an OG too, you know what I'm saying? It ain't going nowhere. But what I'm trying to say is that people are going to get they high on regardless of the laws prohibiting it, period. If you took away all the drugs on the planet right now, somebody would go out and find out that if you smoke a pine cone dipped in molasses, it'll get you high. And motherfuckers will be hooked. I mean, they just gonna do it. People gonna do what they gonna do. It's what humans do. They experiment and they find a way to make their libations. I'm just saying. And all right, it's about that time for us to wrap this thing up. But before I go, we got a couple of church announcements. Hopefully you saw the post about my appearance on the Fat Girl Chronicles podcast. That shit was fun as hell, even with all the technical difficulties I have. I tell you, I learn and I grow in this game. But it really felt like I was at the cookout or at a family reunion. If you didn't get a chance to catch it live, check it out on the YouTube page for Fat Girl Chronicles, and that's spelled PHAT. And if you miss the country girl, you can always hit me up on the socials, baby. You know, it's Melanin Mayhem on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And it's Melanin Mayhem PC on X. If you are more of the email type, you can send me an email at melaninmayhempodcast@gmail.com. This week's New Ordination shout out goes to My Honest Opinion. It's titled Don't Change Anything. I discovered your podcast yesterday as a suggestion through Apple Podcasts because I listened to true crime entirely too much. I was very hesitant, but baby, after I listened to The Killer Who Snitched on Himself, I started from episode 1. I love how you tell the stories by being your authentic self. It's like we're sitting at a brunch instead of sitting through a podcast. It's so personal. I hate that I be laughing sometimes because the details of the crimes be very serious and so severe, but the way you describe it and the details in your own words be so hilarious. So far, my favorite episode is the episode about Hollywood. Girl, you gave him the business, but I have so much to catch up on, so it may change. And I can tell you're not reading from a script. Did I mention that I am in love after just one episode? Please, please, please keep going. So proud to be a new member of the New One Nation. I see now why you have almost 200 5-star reviews. Not one person review is less than 5 stars. You are authentically amazing. Oh my God. My honest opinion. Oh my God. You got me just tearing up over here. That was a real ass review. And I am so appreciative of it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for loving the way I do what I do, honey. And welcome to the New One Nation, honey. If you haven't done so, go ahead and join that private discussion group on Facebook. You can look for it. It's called the Melanin Mayhem Podcast Discussion Group. Again, thank you for your kind words, and please believe the country girl is going to keep them coming. All right, y'all. Enough of that mushy stuff. This doggone episode is so long. It's so long, and it is so late. I'm going to be up so late chopping this thing up, so I got to get out of here. So I'm going to go. You know what's next, right? Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And if you stay ready, you might spot Frank Matthews living next to your grandmama down the street there in Durham. That reward is still out there. Although at this point, y'all leave that man alone. It's one love, the one nation, and the country girl is out of here.